The Force is light and full of shadows.
Before we dive in, check the link in the description if you want exclusive Timelines members-only videos you won't find on YouTube, all on our Patreon. The office smells like old stone and power. Mace Windu is dead. Anakin stands at the center of the room and does not move. The window behind Palpatine is gone. 4 stories of transparent steel obliterated by the storm outside. Or by what happened in this room, and the distinction no longer matters. The wind comes through without permission. It moves Anakin's hair. It moves nothing else in him. Palpatine is on the floor. He looks small. That is the first coherent thought Anakin's mind produces. Not relief, not horror, not the calculus of what he has just done. But the simple animal observation that the most powerful man in the Republic, possibly in the history of the Republic, looks very small when he is crumpled against the base of his own desk. His face is ruined. The lightning that Mace deflected back into him has done something permanent to the architecture beneath his skin. The yellow eyes are real now. Whatever mask he wore for 20 years is gone, burned off by his own power. He is looking at Anakin. He has not stopped looking at Anakin since Mace fell. "What have you done?" Palpatine says. It is not a question. It is a measurement, the tone a scientist uses when an experiment produces an unexpected result. He is not afraid. That is the thing that should terrify Anakin and doesn't. Not yet. Because Anakin's terror is pointed entirely in one direction. At the window, at the dark, at the city sprawling 30 stories below in the Coruscant night, at a woman sleeping in an apartment not 3 kilometers from this room. "Padmé, I made a choice," Anakin says. His voice sounds like someone else's. Palpatine's hand moves. Not toward a weapon, toward the desk, toward the panel that Anakin knows, without having been told, contains the control for the emergency Senate broadcast. The order. He has heard Palpatine use the phrase once, in a meeting Anakin was not supposed to be present for, through a door he was not supposed to be listening at. Execute Order 66. He didn't understand it then. He understands it now with a completeness that sits in his stomach like swallowed glass, the clones, the chips, the Jedi, the systematic. He crosses the room in 2 steps and seizes Palpatine's wrist. The grip is not gentle. "Don't," Anakin says. Palpatine looks at the hand around his wrist. He looks at Anakin. Something moves behind the ruined face. Recalculation. The rapid reorganization of a mind that has survived 60 years of politics by being faster than every other mind in the room. "You cannot stop what is already in motion," Palpatine says. Quiet. Almost gentle. The order has contingencies. Automated triggers. You are one man, Anakin. One very powerful, very emotional man, standing between me and the destiny of the galaxy. You told me you could save her. I can still. You told me you could save her. Anakin says again, and this time the words have weight behind them, the weight of 3 weeks of nightmares and desperate study and hours in the temple archives searching for anything Plagueis had written, anything Palpatine had let slip, any thread that could be pulled. 3 weeks of watching Padmé's face tighten when she thought he wasn't looking. You told me the dark side had the power to stop death. That was the only thing I cared about. And it does. Anakin, listen to me. What you did to Windu was impulsive, but it doesn't have to end here. The path is still. She's going to die anyway. The words arrive in the room without warning. Anakin did not plan to say them. They are simply true, arriving in his mouth the way truth sometimes does when the body is tired of carrying it. Blunt, undecorated, not a statement of despair but of knowledge. He knows. He has known, somewhere beneath the terror, for days. The visions keep coming and they keep ending the same way, and he has been running from that ending. Sprinting toward Palpatine's promise, like a man running toward a light in a dark room without looking at the floor. She's going to die, and I almost. He stops. The room goes quiet. The wind comes through the broken window. Somewhere below, Coruscant moves in total ignorance of what is happening in this office, in this exact second, to the shape of everything. Anakin's mouth closes, because the sound arrives. It does not arrive through his ears. There is no transmission, no frequency, no mechanism he can name. It arrives the way his nightmares arrive, directly, bypassing the intermediary of sense, depositing itself in the center of his chest like a coal pressed against skin. He is standing in Palpatine's office with his hand around Palpatine's wrist, and his ribs breathing, and his eyes open. And he is simultaneously somewhere else. Polis Massa. He knows it the way you know a place in a dream without being told. The white walls, the antiseptic, the low hum of Kaladahin life support systems. A medical table. White light. Padmé, she is on the table and she is dying, and she is alone. And that fact, alone, is a lance through the sternum, clean and specific and worse than anything Palpatine's lightning could have done. She is alone. He is not there. The Sith path, the power he spent 3 weeks crawling toward, the bargain he was 30 seconds from sealing, it did not bring him to her bedside. It took him away. That is the content of what the Force is showing him. Not a warning. A completed fact. This is where the road you were on ends. Her lips are moving. He can hear her. He is across the galaxy, and 3 weeks in the future, and he can hear her the way he heard his mother in the dream. Not distorted, not muffled, but with the intimacy of standing close, of leaning down, of being the one person in the universe she is trying to reach. There is good in him. A breath. A cost of air she cannot afford, I know. There's still. The breath stops. Her eyes do not close all the way. Anakin comes back into his body like a stone dropping into water, sudden and total and displacing everything. His hand is still around Palpatine's wrist. 3 seconds have passed. He knows because the candle on the desk is still burning at the same height, and Palpatine's expression has shifted only slightly, recalibrating around the fact that Anakin went somewhere for a moment and has returned visibly changed. He is crying. He did not decide to cry. There was no moment of permission granted. His face is simply wet, the way a wound produces blood. Automatic. Physical. A body reporting its damage. His grip on Palpatine's wrist does not loosen. Palpatine sees the tears. Something flickers in the yellow eyes. It might be hope. The recalcitrant hope of a man who has not yet conceded the room. Anakin, he says softly. Whatever you just experienced, whatever the Force showed you, it doesn't have to be the future. That's what I've been trying to. I know what you've been trying to do. The words are quiet. Quieter than anything Anakin has said since he walked through this door. They carry the specific register of a man who has just had something cauterized, not healed, but closed. Palpatine stops speaking. He recognizes something in Anakin's face. Finally. And what he recognizes is the absence of the thing he has been exploiting for 20 years. The fear is gone. Not replaced by peace. Not replaced by anything noble or resolved. The fear is gone, and in its place there is grief, enormous and ongoing. But grief is not a lever Palpatine can pull. Grief does not need him. Anakin releases his wrist. He steps back. I'm going to my wife, he says. And then, because the order is a real thing with real contingencies, and Palpatine's hand is already moving back toward the desk panel, Anakin reaches out with the Force and tears the entire control panel from the wall. It hits the floor on the far side of the room. Sparks, silence, Palpatine's hand comes up fast. Not toward the desk, there is no desk panel anymore, but toward Anakin himself. The Force crackling between them in a sustained white-hot burst that catches Anakin across the shoulder and chest before he turns his back fully on it, the lightning burning through the fabric of his robe and leaving something structural wrong in the muscle beneath. The pain arrives without ceremony. It is information. He catalogs it and keeps moving. He is already at the door. The clones will execute their orders with or without that panel, Palpatine says. Still quiet. Still measuring, even now, even with his hand still extended and the lightning gone and the room reduced to wreckage. You cannot stop it. You are one man. I know, Anakin says. He is already moving toward the door. But she gets to hear it from me first. The elevator doesn't work. Of course it doesn't. The building's power grid is already stuttering. Anakin felt it in the walls on his way out of Palpatine's office, the deep architectural shudder of a system receiving override commands from somewhere central, somewhere military. The Coruscant Guard. They will be moving to secure the Senate district within the next 20 minutes, maybe less. And the elevator banks in the Chancellor's executive tower are exactly the kind of infrastructure a competent commander locks down first. Anakin takes the maintenance stairs. His right shoulder is wrong. The lightning that Palpatine sent into him in the final seconds of the confrontation, after the control panel fell, when Anakin turned his back and Palpatine used what he had left, has done something structural to the muscle. Not broken, not torn. Something in between. Something that announces itself as a hot wire running from the base of his neck to the middle of his back every time his right arm swings. He keeps moving. The pain is information. He catalogs it and files it and does not stop. 12 flights down, he hears the first one. A single blaster shot. Distant, above him, upper levels, Senate tier, the sound bouncing down the stairwell in a long, flat echo. Then 3 more in rapid succession. Then nothing. Then, much further away, a sound that is not a shot. A sound that is many shots becoming continuous, becoming ambient, becoming the background radiation of a city that has just been turned against itself. He doesn't slow down. At the ground-level access point, a service door, Durasteel, sealed, he pauses for 4 seconds, long enough to reach out with the Force and map what's on the other side. 2 people, a loading dock. Repulsor pallets, cargo, the specific flavor of boredom that precedes ignorance of catastrophe. They don't know yet. Whatever is happening on the upper levels has not reached the service workers in the building's intestinal infrastructure. He goes through. They look up. A Mirialan woman with a cargo manifest, and a human man young enough to still be surprised by things. They see the Jedi robes. They see the blood on his forearm, the gash from the window frame he has not had time to address, which has soaked through the sleeve in a dark spreading stain. They see his face. There's going to be soldiers coming through this building, Anakin says. Not tonight, maybe, but soon. If either of you have somewhere else to be, I'd go there. He doesn't wait for a response. The loading dock opens onto a sub-level access road, not street level, but the intermediate tier that services the Senate District's cargo and utilities infrastructure. 3 meters of clearance overhead. Pipes running in parallel bundles along the ceiling. A speeder, old, commercial, the kind that hauls parts and doesn't ask questions, sits unmanned beside a fuel coupling. He hotwires it in 31 seconds. He knows this model. He has known this model since he was 9 years old, and Watto had 2 of them, and Anakin took one apart to see how it worked, and put it back together in an hour and a half, and never told Watto. He takes the speeder down. Level 1313 receives him the way it receives everything from above, with complete indifference. The upper city is dying, and the underworld doesn't know and wouldn't particularly care if it did. Down here the light is artificial, always, the kind of orange-yellow that comes from fixtures installed decades ago and maintained minimally and never replaced, unless they fail completely. The air has the layered quality of a place that processes the exhaled breath of 1 trillion people before it gets here. Not foul, exactly, but dense. Used, the smell of industry and cookfires and something chemical that Anakin cannot identify and does not need to. He ditches the speeder in an alley between what appears to be a parts exchange and what is definitely a gambling establishment. Based on the noise, he pulls the robe's hood up. It covers the Padawan braid he no longer has, and the Jedi insignia that was never on the robe anyway, but it covers his face, and that is sufficient for now. His shoulder pulses. He reaches under the robe and tears a strip from the inner lining, clean fabric, or clean enough, and uses his teeth and one hand to wrap the forearm wound with the mechanical efficiency of a man who has dressed battlefield injuries on himself more times than he can accurately count. It's not enough. It will hold for an hour. He needs to get to 500 Republica in under 40 minutes. He runs the route in his head. The direct path, surface level, Senate District. The elegant pedestrian transit that connects the residential towers is closed. The Coruscant Guard will have that locked inside the hour, if they don't already. The secondary path through the mid-level commercial ring is faster than it should be, because nobody is moving cargo during Order 66, but it exposes him on long straightaways where a single guard patrol with a comms unit ends everything. The third path goes deeper before it goes up. Through 1313. Through the old utility corridors that connect the underworld's infrastructure to the residential tower service networks. Maintenance routes that predate the current city layout by 400 years, that appear on no Republic security map, that Anakin knows because he spent 3 months on Coruscant during the war following Ahsoka through levels she wasn't supposed to know about, watching her navigate by instinct and stubbornness. And he paid attention. He always paid attention. He is 40 meters into the utility corridor when he hears the footsteps behind him. 2 sets. Not military. The rhythm is wrong. Too casual. The spacing of people following rather than patrolling. He keeps his pace even. Keeps his hands away from his sides in the body language of someone who has nothing and is going nowhere in particular. The footsteps maintain distance. Testing, he rounds a corner. Stops, presses back against the wall. They come around the corner 30 seconds later. 2 humans. Male. The specific build of men who earn their living in the gaps between legal and illegal. One has a blaster at his hip. The other has something longer. Something that looks modified. The barrel wider than standard. They stop when they see him standing there instead of retreating. The one with the blaster says, "Robe like that. Down here." "Robe like what?" Anakin says. "Jedi robe." He says it without particular inflection, not accusation, not alarm. Assessment. Jedi are being shot up top right now, the second one adds, almost conversational. Soldiers everywhere. Real organized. "We had a runner come through 20 minutes ago," said the Temple Don't. Anakin says. The word lands with more force than he intended. The man stops. In the silence that follows, Anakin becomes aware that he has been walking for 11 minutes, and in 11 minutes has not allowed himself to think about the temple, about who is in the temple, about the younglings in the crèche and the knights in the training halls, and the masters he has spent half his life arguing with, and learning from, and resenting, and needing. And he is not going to think about it now, because if he starts, he will not be able to stop, and Padmé needs him to be able to stop. "What do you want?" Anakin says. His voice is level again. The first man looks at him for a long moment, then at the blaster at his own hip, then back at Anakin's face, with the expression of someone doing math about survival. "There's a passage about 400 meters ahead," he says finally. "Branches left. Takes you up to the residential service network. Faster than whatever route you're running." Anakin looks at him. "Why?" he says. The man shrugs. It is a very specific kind of shrug. The shrug of someone who has spent 20 years under the authority of people who don't care whether he lives, and has arrived at a terminal indifference to their enemies. "Republic never did much for 1313, he says. "Whatever's happening up there doesn't look like our problem." He steps aside. Anakin moves past them. He does not thank them. In 1313, gratitude implies debt, and he has no time for the negotiation that follows. But at the branch point, 400 meters ahead, exactly where the man said, a left-hand corridor barely wide enough to walk upright. He pauses for 1 second and commits it to memory. The face. The location. The specific human quality of a man who, in the middle of a galaxy choosing sides, chose nothing and opened a door anyway. He will remember it. He goes up. Above him, the sound of the city dying continues. It has not stopped since the stairwell. He has learned, in 11 minutes of running, to hear it as texture rather than event, the background noise of a thing too large to process as it happens, that will only be comprehensible in retrospect, from a distance. When there is time to grieve everything at once. There is no time now. There is only the corridor, rising, and at the top of it, 3 kilometers away through walls and levels and the body of a city that does not know what it has just become. Padmé, awake or asleep, alone either way, and not yet knowing either. He moves faster. The service door opens into a utility closet on the 43rd floor. Anakin stands in the dark for 10 seconds and listens. The building has its own specific acoustic signature, the low resonance of climate systems, the occasional soft percussion of a turbolift moving through its shaft, the particular silence of a residential tower where the wealthy sleep behind triple insulated walls and believe, as the wealthy always believe, that their altitude protects them. Nothing moves in the corridor outside. No boots. No voices. The guard hasn't reached 500 Republica yet. He has maybe 15 minutes. He finds the corridor by feel, closes the utility door behind him without sound, and moves toward the apartment he has never officially visited and can navigate blindfolded. He knows which panels in the hallway floor creak under weight because Padmé told him once, laughing, that she memorized them when she was a junior senator and spent 3 months terrified of waking her neighbors during late-night comm sessions. He steps over them without thinking. Her door is locked. He presses his palm flat against it and reaches through the force, feeling for the mechanism the way a surgeon feels for a pulse. Specific, careful, not forcing. The lock disengages. He goes in. She is awake. That is the first thing. She is sitting up in bed in the dark, not the posture of someone startled out of sleep, but of someone who has been sitting with the dark voluntarily, thinking inside it. The room is dim, one lamp on low, the Coruscant cityscape filling the windows with its permanent amber light. She sees him in the doorway, and something crosses her face that is not one emotion but several arriving simultaneously, none of them with clean names. Anakin, she says. Not a question. Not surprise, exactly, more the sound of someone confirming a thing they weren't sure they were allowed to hope for. He crosses the room. He does not say anything yet. He sits on the edge of the bed, not reaching for her, not closing the distance, just sitting at the perimeter of her space with his forearms on his knees and his head bowed. And for a moment, that is everything. His presence, his being here instead of wherever the night could have taken him. She reaches over and turns up the lamp. She sees the forearm. The blood, dried now to a dark rust color through the makeshift bandage. The way he is holding his right shoulder, not dramatically, but with the subtle compensatory stillness of someone managing pain without acknowledging it. How bad? She says. It's fine. Anakin, the shoulder will heal. The arm needs to be cleaned. He looks up. I have about 12 minutes before this building becomes difficult to leave. Then say what you came to say. He looks at her face. She is 31 weeks along now, the pregnancy visible even in the loose sleep clothes, the specific gravity of a woman carrying something irreplaceable. She looks tired in the way she has looked tired for 3 weeks. The tiredness that lives behind her eyes rather than on her face. The tiredness of someone running on resolution alone. She has not complained once. He knows this because he has been watching her not complain with the specific attention of a man who understands that the person he loves is doing something difficult without asking for acknowledgement. He looks at her face, and he tells her. He does not organize it. There is no time to organize it, and organization would be a courtesy he doesn't deserve, the narrative shaping that makes an account of one's own failure easier to receive. He gives it to her raw. Palpatine. The truth of what Palpatine is. Every layer of it. The Sith. The manufactured war. The clones. The chips. The order. He watches her face move through the information with the controlled precision of a woman who has spent 15 years in politics absorbing things that should not be true and finding the structural implications of them before the shock has fully registered. She doesn't interrupt. She doesn't make sounds of disbelief. She sits with it, each piece of it, her hands resting on the curve of her stomach. He tells her about Mace, what happened in the office, what Mace said to Palpatine, and what he said back. And what Anakin did in the 3 seconds between those two things. He does not soften it. He made a choice, and the choice had a cost, and the cost has a name. Her eyes close briefly, open again. Then he tells her about the vision. This part he cannot make brief. Not because the vision was long, 3 seconds, he said, and physically that is true, but because it was total. He tries to give her the content of it without giving her the image, and discovers that is not possible. They are the same thing. He tells her about the white room, the medical table, the sound of her breathing becoming something it should not be. He tells her she was alone. He stops there. The room is very quiet. You heard me, she says. Yes, she looks at him for a long time. He does not look away. There is something she is working through, something that requires her to look at him directly while she works through it, and he understands that the looking is part of what she needs. To see what his face does while she processes what he has just given her. "That was going to be me," she says. 3 weeks from now. "Yes, and you were going to be." She stops. Starts again. "The thing you almost became." "Yes." She exhales. It is a long exhale, the kind that takes something with it on the way out. Not forgiveness. Forgiveness is not the right word for what happens between two people when one of them has stepped back from the edge of becoming something the other could not have survived. It is more like the release of a weight that has been held in anticipation of impact. The weight is not gone. It will not be gone. But the impact has not come, and the body begins, incrementally, to unclench. "I'm not going to tell you it's fine," she says. "I know. I need you to understand that it's not fine. What you almost did. What you were willing to. I need you to know that I understand what that was. I know. And I also." Her voice does the thing it sometimes does when she is being more honest than she planned to be. The slight roughness of it. "I understand why. That's the part I can't. I understand why, Anakin, and I don't know what to do with that." He does not try to resolve it for her. That is not what she is asking for. She is telling him the shape of what she is carrying, and the correct response to being told the shape of something is not to try to reshape it. "I have to get you out," he says. "Tonight, both of you." Her hand moves on her stomach. "Instinctive, Bail," she says. She means Bail Organa. She means the network, the name she has kept in a compartment separate from everything else, the contingency she has been building quietly for 3 weeks since Anakin first told her about the nightmares, and she looked at his face and understood, with the diagnostic clarity of a politician who has survived 15 years of people lying to her, that the situation was worse than he was saying. "I've already thought about who to contact," she says. "I know you have." A ghost of something moves across her face. Not quite a smile. The shape of one. "We need a ship," she says. "Working on it." "You don't have a ship. I have 30 credits and a stolen speeder, and extremely specific knowledge of which landing pads in this district don't have functional surveillance." He pauses. "And the Force." This time, it is a smile. Small, and tired, and real. She starts to move, to get up, to begin the practical work of leaving a life behind in under 10 minutes, which is a thing she has done before and hoped never to do again. He stands to give her room. She pauses beside him, close enough that he can feel the warmth of her, and she puts her hand flat against his chest. Not an embrace, just contact, palm against sternum. Feeling, "There is good in you," she says. He goes still. She says it the way one states a verified fact. Not reassurance. Not the generous construction of a woman who loves him and so performs belief. She says it the way she said the Senate will not abide this in a committee room 6 years ago, with the full weight of her political certainty, which is the most reliable instrument she owns. He covers her hand with his. The lamp is still on. Outside, the amber light of Coruscant continues its permanent vigil. Somewhere above them, the shape of the Republic is being disassembled piece by piece in the dark. They have 7 minutes. She goes to pack. He goes to find them a way out. The ship is a Corellian freighter, mid-grade, the kind that hauls spice and asks nothing about the manifest. Anakin did not steal it. That distinction matters to him in a way he cannot fully justify given the current circumstances, so he files it without examining it. He paid for it, 30 credits down, a Jedi communication chip worth considerably more as collateral, and a conversation with a Toydarian dockmaster who looked at Anakin's face and the woman beside him and made the calculation that whatever was happening above them on the Senate tier was probably a good reason to accept unusual payment terms and not ask about the blood. The ship is called the Meridian. It has a hyperdrive that sounds like it has opinions about being used, and a cockpit that smells like burnt calf and old cargo and 3 weeks of someone else's journey. Anakin does not care about any of this. He cares that it has a secure comm bay with analog frequency capability, old hardware, pre-imperial. The kind that doesn't route through Republic relay stations and therefore cannot be intercepted by systems that did not exist 6 hours ago. He sets the course for Polis Massa, engages the hyperdrive, listens to it complain. Then he goes to the comm bay. The frequency is one Obi-Wan established during the Outer Rim sieges, a rotating cipher built on a sequence. Only the two of them know. The solution to a mathematics problem Obi-Wan posed to him during a 3-day siege on Christophsis, when there was nothing to do but wait, and Anakin was 19 and had not yet learned to wait. He worked out the solution in 6 hours. Obi-Wan looked at it and said, "I expected it to take you longer," which was Obi-Wan for "I'm proud of you," and Anakin understood it as such even then. He has not used the frequency in 8 months. He inputs the cipher. Adjust the analog tuner by increments so small the adjustment is effectively a fingerprint. Nobody tunes to this exact rotation without knowing the sequence. He transmits a single pulse, the agreed signal, "I'm here. Are you?" Then he waits. Hyperspace moves around the ship in its blue-white permanence. Through the small porthole in the comm bay, it looks like speed made visible, like the universe showing its workings, all that distance compressed into light. Anakin has traveled hyperspace thousands of times and has never found it anything other than calming, which is not a thing he has ever admitted to anyone, because it is not the kind of thing Anakin Skywalker admits. 4 minutes and 17 seconds after the pulse, the frequency crackles. Obi-Wan's voice arrives the way it always does, measured, the vowels precise, with the specific texture of a man choosing every word before releasing it. "You're alive. You sound surprised," Anakin says. "I'm not surprised. I'm..." A pause. The pause of a man editing himself in real time. "Are you safe? Relatively you? I'm on an emergency evac shuttle out of Utapau. Cody," another pause. Heavier, the clones turned. Mid-engagement. "I went into the water and they assumed. I don't know what they assumed. I didn't wait to find out." Anakin closes his eyes. Cody, Commander Cody, who served with Obi-Wan for 3 years, whose voice Anakin has heard give battle reports and tactical assessments and occasional dry observations about Jedi recklessness. A man. Whatever is in the chip made him something other than a man for the duration of the Order, and Anakin does not know if that is better or worse than the alternative. "It's the chips," Anakin says. "Inhibitor chips. In all of them. Palpatine, Sidious had them installed during the cloning process. Order 66 activates them. They can't. It's not a choice they're making." Silence on the frequency. "How do you know that?" "I know a lot of things I didn't know this morning." He says it without inflection. "Obi-Wan, I need you to listen to me, and I need you to not respond until I've finished." A beat. Then, "All right." He tells it the way he told Padmé, without organizing it, without the mercy of narrative shape. Palpatine, the office. Mace, what he almost did before the vision, and what the vision was and what he did after. He does not spare himself in the telling. He is aware that this is the hardest account, not because Obi-Wan will be less understanding than Padmé, but because Obi-Wan will understand differently. Padmé understood with her heart first. Obi-Wan will understand with the part of him that trained Anakin, that watched him for 13 years, that saw every warning sign and made every judgment call about when to push and when to let it go. Obi-Wan's understanding will contain, somewhere inside it, a reckoning with his own role in the shape of this night. Anakin does not want to give him that burden. He gives it to him anyway. Because the alternative is a version of events that protects Obi-Wan from the parts that reflect on Obi-Wan, and they are past the point where that protection serves either of them. He finishes. The frequency hums. "Anakin," Obi-Wan says. His voice has changed. Something in it that Anakin has heard perhaps twice in 13 years, the register that lives beneath the composure. The vision. Padmé's words. "Yes, you heard her." Yes, another silence. Anakin lets it exist. There is something Obi-Wan is doing in that silence, not processing the tactical information, not running contingencies, but something prior to all of that. Something that requires a moment of uncharacteristic stillness from a man for whom stillness is usually a performance of calm rather than the thing itself. "I failed you," Obi-Wan says. "Don't. Not as a confession, Anakin, as a fact. I am trying to be accurate. The precision of it, the refusal to let it be emotional rather than true, is so specifically Obi-Wan that something catches in Anakin's chest. I saw the signs. Multiple times. I made the assessment that you were capable of managing them, and I prioritized the mission, and I chose the war over you. Repeatedly. I need you to know that I know that. Obi-Wan, I'm not asking for absolution. I'm asking you to let me say it once so that we don't spend the next however long we have pretending it isn't true. Anakin puts his hand flat on the comm console. The metal is cool. The ship moves through hyperspace in its blue silence. It's true, he says. And I'm not. I don't need you to have been different. I need you to be where you are now. Where am I now? Alive, Anakin says, on a frequency only we know. Which means you're exactly where you need to be. The hum of the frequency. The complaints of the hyperdrive. Distant, where are you going? Obi-Wan asks. Polis Massa. A pause that contains recalibration. Obi-Wan running the implications, the geography, the medical infrastructure of a remote Kaladahan asteroid. Arriving at the answer. The babies, he says. Yes, how long? She's stable. 31 weeks. But the vision. He stops. I don't know how much the vision changes. I know she was going to die on that table, and I know that path is gone now. I don't know what that means for what's still coming. You're afraid she'll still? I'm afraid of a lot of things, Anakin says. I'm moving anyway. Something that might be, in another man, a sound of affection. In Obi-Wan it is barely a breath. Yes, you always did. Polis Massa is remote enough that the Imperial reach will take time to arrive. Back to tactical. Back to the register where Obi-Wan is most comfortable, and Anakin understands that the return to tactical is not avoidance, but recovery, the way a man stands up after being hit. Not pretending the hit didn't land but declining to stay on the ground. I can be there in 31 hours if I push the shuttle. I'll send coordinates. Anakin, a pause. The weight of 13 years in it. Tell her. Tell Padmé that He stops. Anakin waits. Tell her the Republic was lucky to have her. Tell her yourself, Anakin says. 31 hours. He closes the frequency. In the main cabin, Padmé's not asleep. She is sitting with her back against the cabin wall and her legs extended, and a datapad in her hands. She found it in a storage compartment. Someone else's. And she is reading it with the focused attention of a woman who has decided that thinking is preferable to feeling for the next several hours. She looks up when he enters. Obi-Wan, she says. Not a question. Alive, Utapau, he'll meet us. She absorbs this. Nods once, he sits across from her. The ship hums. Hyperspace does its indifferent work outside the porthole. The datapad, he says. What is it? She turns it so he can see. Agricultural yield reports from the Naboo Eastern Provinces. The most boring document in the known galaxy. I can't read anything real right now, she says simply. So I'm reading this. He understands this perfectly. He has done the equivalent. After Jabim, after Geonosis, after every engagement that left too much residue, found the most mundane possible task, and performed it with complete attention, because the alternative was the residue. He reaches over and takes the datapad from her hands, reads a paragraph about grain storage protocols in the Dija Peak region. Reads it again. She watches him read it. After a while, she leans her head back against the wall and closes her eyes. Not sleep, just rest. Just the eyes closed, and the breathing slowing, and the body making its small concessions to what it has been through. He keeps reading. The meridian moves through the dark between stars. Polis Massa hangs in the asteroid field like a gray thought. From the meridian's cockpit, the station is visible as a cluster of pressurized domes pressed into the rock face, functional, deliberately unremarkable, the architecture of a civilization that values work over aesthetics and has been conducting that work in isolation for long enough that it no longer considers the isolation unusual. The Kaladahan do not advertise. Their research station appears on navigation charts as a medical facility and nothing more, which is precisely why Bail Organa chose it. and precisely why Padmé knew to name it when Anakin asked where, and precisely why it is the right answer even now. Anakin brings the Meridian in on a low approach vector. No transponder ping. The dockmaster, a Kaladahin whose large pale eyes track the ship's approach with the patient attention of someone who has seen unexpected arrivals before and developed a policy of asking questions later, guides them to a bay without requiring identification. Padmé walks off the ship under her own power. Anakin stays close without hovering. They have been here 40 minutes when Obi-Wan's shuttle clears the asteroid field. He looks older. That is Anakin's first assessment, standing in the hangar bay watching the shuttle touch down. Not dramatically older. Not aged in the way that catastrophe ages people in stories, but older the way a man looks when he has spent 31 hours alone with specific knowledge and has not slept. There is something around his eyes, something in the set of his shoulders that is not quite the Obi-Wan who has been carrying himself with composed authority since Anakin was 9 years old. The ramp descends. Obi-Wan walks down it and stops at the bottom and looks at Anakin across 8 meters of hangar floor. Neither of them moves for a moment. Then Obi-Wan crosses the distance. He does not extend a hand. He does not make the adjustments men make when they have decided to perform normalcy. He stops 2 meters away and looks at Anakin's face with the direct attention of a man who has been looking at this face for 13 years and is taking an accurate inventory of what the night has done to it. "You look terrible," Obi-Wan says. "You look worse," Anakin says. A beat. The ghost of something that would be, under different circumstances, the beginning of a familiar exchange. Then Obi-Wan says, "Where is she?" Padmé is in the medical suite. Not in crisis. The Kaladahin physician, whose name Anakin cannot pronounce, and who has not offered an alternative, conducted an initial assessment with the unhurried competence of someone for whom competence is so fundamental it no longer resembles effort. The babies are stable. She is stable. She needs rest and monitoring, and the specific kind of stillness that is very difficult for a woman who has been running on adrenaline and political will for 72 hours. She is not still. She is sitting up on the medical cot when Obi-Wan enters, and she looks at him with the expression of a woman who is glad to see him, and is also in the process of deciding how much of what she is feeling she will allow to be visible. He stops in the doorway. Something moves through him. Relief. Complicated and not entirely welcome. The relief of a man who was braced for worse news. "Senator," he says. "Obi-Wan," she says. "You can call me Padmé. At this point I think we've earned it." He comes in, sits in the chair beside the cot, the patient's chair, functional, clearly designed for people who will sit in it for long hours. He sits in it with the posture of someone who might be in it for long hours and is not opposed to that. "He told you," she says. "Not Anakin's account. The account. Everything." "Yes," Obi-Wan says. And he is quiet for a moment. She lets him be quiet. "I have been a Jedi for 37 years, he says finally. "I have a very well-developed set of frameworks for understanding most situations." He pauses. "I'm finding that none of them are adequate for this one, which is either a personal failure or an indication that this situation is genuinely outside the range of standard frameworks." "It's the second one," Padmé says. "I suspect you're right. Anakin is in the hangar when Bail Organa's ship arrives. He did not know Bail was coming. Padmé sent a transmission during the 31 hours in hyperspace. Brief. Encrypted. Coordinates and a timestamp and nothing else. Which is the way Padmé communicates things that cannot be communicated in words. Bail understood it as invitation and instruction simultaneously, which is the way Bail receives things, because Bail Organa has been in the same political weight class as Padmé Amidala for 15 years, and they have developed a shorthand that operates below the threshold of language. The ship is a diplomatic courier. Small, fast, the kind that carries senators on private business, and has enough official markings to discourage cursory inspection. Bail comes down the ramp with the bearing of a man who has been moving fast for 31 hours, and has decided that bearing is the one thing he will not compromise. He sees Anakin. He stops. The hangar bay holds the weight of this for a moment. Bail Organa is a man who has spent 15 years in the same political circles as the Jedi, who has worked with the Order, respected the order, believed in what the order represented. He is also a man who received a transmission from Padmé Amidala in the middle of a galaxy-wide military coup and got on a ship immediately, which means his framework for the current situation is already outside the standard parameters. He looks at Anakin with the specific attention of a man taking a full accounting. "Senator Organa," Anakin says. "Skywalker, a pause. Padmé, stable, medical suite, level 2. Bail nods once. He does not move toward the level 2 access corridor. Not yet. He has something to do first, and he is not a man who postpones necessary things. "I need to understand what happened in that office," Bail says. "I know. Not for my own satisfaction. Because what happens next, what we build, what we protect, who we trust, it depends on an accurate account of what you did and why you did it, and what you were going to do before you didn't." The last phrase lands with precision. What you were going to do before you didn't. Bail is a politician of the First Order, and he has chosen every word in that sentence. Anakin looks at him. "I was going to kneel," Anakin says. "I was going to swear myself to him. I was 30 seconds from it. He was going to tell me the Sith could save her, and I was going to believe it, because I needed to believe something, and he was the only one offering." Bail does not react. He is listening in the way of a man who asked a question he already half knew the answer to, and is confirming his own assessment. "What stopped you?" Bail says. "She did." He does not elaborate. Bail looks at his face and reads what is not being elaborated, and nods. A single, considered nod. The nod of a man filing information accurately. "Mace Windu," Bail says. "Yes, that will follow you. I know. There will be people I work with, people I need, who will not be able to separate what you did in that office from what you almost did. Who will see Anakin Skywalker and calculate risk before they calculate anything else. I know," Anakin says again. The repetition is not resignation. It is the specific acknowledgement of a man who has already had this conversation with himself, at length, in the calm bay of a freighter moving through hyperspace and has arrived at the far side of it. "I'm not one of them," Bail says. Anakin looks at him. "I want to be clear about that," Bail says. "I'm telling you the obstacle exists because you need to know it exists. I'm not the obstacle." He pauses. "Padmé trusts you. She has trusted you through things that would have ended most people's trust, which means her trust is not naive and is not easily withdrawn. That carries weight with me. The hangar bay is cold. The asteroid's rock face is visible through the viewport in the far wall, gray, ancient, indifferent. What do you need from me?" Anakin says. "Right now?" Bail considers. "Nothing. Be here. Be what she needs. Let the rest. The larger question of what you become in all of this, let that develop without forcing it." A pause. "You have a history of forcing things." "I'm aware." Something shifts in Bail's expression, not quite humor, but the adjacent quality. The recognition of an honest answer. "Go be with your wife," Bail says. He moves past Anakin toward the level 2 corridor. Stops at the entrance. Turns back. "Skywalker," he says. "For what it's worth, and I understand it may not be worth very much, from where you're standing. What you did in that office took more strength than kneeling would have." He goes. Anakin stands in the hangar bay alone. Outside the viewport, the asteroid field moves in its slow, indifferent drift, rock by rock by rock, the silent company of things that endure by being too dense to destroy. He stands in it for a while. Then he follows. The alarm sounds at 0340. It does not sound like the alarms in the stories. Not a dramatic klaxon. Not the kind of sound that announces itself as significant. It is a soft, persistent tone. The medical frequency that Cullodehin facilities use specifically because it does not spike adrenaline in patients who need to remain calm. It sounds like a reminder. It sounds like a question. Anakin is awake before it completes its first cycle. He has been sitting in the chair beside Padmé's cot for 6 hours. Not sleeping. He tried sleeping, twice, and both times found himself in the same place, The white room, the medical table, the sound of breathing that was running out. The visions are not the same as before. They are not prophetic. They are residue. The mind returning to the image it cannot unfold, the way a tongue finds a damaged tooth. He knows the difference. He sat with the difference for 6 hours and watched Padmé sleep and listened to the monitoring equipment maintain its steady commentary on 2 heartbeats that were not hers. The alarm changes the quality of the air. The Kaladahan physician, the one whose name Anakin cannot pronounce, enters the room in the specific unhurried way of medical professionals who have trained the urgency out of their body language, because urgency transfers to patients. The large pale eyes move immediately to the monitoring equipment. The hands move to the secondary display. Anakin is already standing. "What is it?" he says. The physician looks at him. In the Kaladahan manner, no mouth to speak with in the human sense, communication through subtle shifts of expression, and a vocoder technology embedded in the collar, there is a brief adjustment of the face before the vocoder produces words. Cardiovascular stress. Mild but escalating. A pause that is not hesitation, but precision. The senator's heart rate has been climbing for the past 40 minutes, slowly enough that the primary alarm threshold was not met until now. What's causing it? Unknown. Physiologically, she is presenting without direct cause. The children are not in distress. There is no hemorrhage, no infection marker. Another precise pause. The body sometimes, in cases of significant psychological trauma, accelerates without mechanical cause. Anakin looks at Padmé's face. She is still asleep. Or she appears to be asleep. There is something in the set of her brow, a line he knows, the one that appears when she is working on something in sleep that her waking mind will not acknowledge. He sits on the edge of the cot. He puts his hand over hers. She wakes at 0412. The transition from sleep to consciousness is not gradual. She opens her eyes with the specific alertness of someone who has been somewhere difficult and returns to wakefulness as a relief rather than an interruption. She finds Anakin first, his face, his hand over hers, and something in her shoulders releases a degree of tension she was apparently holding even in sleep. "What happened?" she says. "Alarm. Your heart rate." She absorbs this. Her eyes move to the monitoring equipment with the analytical attention she applies to everything, reading the display the way she reads a vote count, looking for patterns. "I was dreaming," she says. "I know. I was on Naboo." She is quiet for a moment. Not a good version of it. He does not ask her to describe it. He understands the category. The mind's version of a prophetic vision, which is not the Force's transmission but the body's own attempt to process what it knows. She has been carrying the knowledge of what almost happened for 36 hours. Her sleeping mind is doing something with it. The physician says physiologically there's no cause, Anakin says. "There's a cause," Padmé says. She says it without bitterness. Factually, yes, she looks at him. "You haven't slept." "No, Anakin, I'll sleep when you're..." He stops. Edits. "I'll sleep later." She looks at him for a long moment with the expression she uses when she has decided not to argue about something that she is not done arguing about. "Then talk to me," she says. "If neither of us is sleeping, we should at least be using the time." He tells her about Shmi. He does not know why this is what arrives. They have talked about Shmi before, briefly, carefully, in the way you talk about things that have jagged edges and need to be handled with awareness of the edges. But at 0420 in a medical suite on a nameless asteroid with the monitoring equipment providing its steady 2-heartbeat commentary, he tells her the full account. Tatooine, the vision. The ride through the dune sea. Arriving too late, not by an hour, not by a margin that better intelligence could have closed, but by minutes. Shmi's hands in his. The specific thing she said. "Ani, I'm so happy. I love you." He says it the way it was said, with the precise inflection of a woman spending her last oxygen on her son's name, then on the only other thing she had left to give. He has carried the sound of it for 12 years and he gives it to Padmé whole, the way he gave her the vision in the apartment. Without editing. Padmé listens. She does not perform listening, she does not make the sounds or the expressions of performed empathy. She simply receives it, and the receiving is total. "I killed them," he says. "After. The Tuskens." "I know," she says. "You knew?" I suspected. A pause. You came back from Tatooine and there was something in you that had been altered. Not grief. Something harder than grief. I was 19 and I didn't have the language for it then. Her eyes are steady on his face. I have the language for it now. He looks at his hands. I told Padmé I told you. In the garage. That I killed them. All of them. He pauses. You said you were sorry. You didn't say I was wrong. You were wrong, she says quietly. And I was 22 and I loved you, and I didn't say it because I didn't know how to say it without losing you. A breath. I should have said it. The monitoring equipment marks 2 heartbeats. You were wrong, she says again. And I love you. And both of those things are entirely true at the same time. I need you to know that I can hold both of those things. That they don't cancel each other. He looks at her face. I know what you almost became, she says. I know the steps that led there. Shmi was the first one. She is not saying this cruelly. She is a woman who has spent 36 hours in a medical suite with full knowledge of who her husband almost was. And she has made her peace with the full knowledge. She is giving him the peace as a fact. I know all of it. And I'm still here. Something in his chest moves. Not relief. Something prior to relief. Something that lives in the territory before the word exists for it. Obi-Wan arrives at the medical suite at 0500. He stands in the doorway with 2 cups of something hot. The Caladan facility's approximation of calf, which Anakin has already established is technically calf in the way that a drawing of a door is technically a door. He looks at both of them. You're both awake, he says. Observant, Padmé says. He comes in, hands 1 cup to Anakin, sets the other on the side table within Padmé's reach. Sits in the secondary chair with the posture of a man who has also not slept. Bail is on a comm with 3 senators, Obi-Wan says. People Padmé identified as trustworthy, which I am choosing to treat as a reliable metric. It is, Padmé says. He's been on it for 2 hours. That sounds right, she says. This conversation has approximately 15 moving pieces. 2 hours is efficient. Obi-Wan looks at Anakin. Something passes between them, not words, not even the Force, just the specific frequency of 2 people who have been in enough difficult rooms together to communicate in the register below language. There's something else, Anakin says. Obi-Wan sets down his cup. Probe droids, he says. 2 of them. Bail's pilot picked up their signatures on the long-range scanner 40 minutes ago. They're not close. They're running a grid pattern through the outer asteroid field. The room is very quiet. They're not looking for us specifically, Obi-Wan continues. Not yet. This looks like a standard sweep new Imperial intelligence establishing coverage of remote facilities. A pause. But they will reach this station's outer perimeter in approximately 19 hours. Anakin looks at Padmé. She is looking at the monitoring display. 2 heartbeats. Steady. Her jaw is set with the specific set of a woman calculating variables. Then we have 19 hours, she says. Her heart rate, the display notes, has not climbed. It has, in fact, steadied. The alarm does not sound again. The probe droids reach the station's outer perimeter at hour 14. 5 hours ahead of estimate. Anakin felt them before Bail's pilot called it in. A specific disturbance in the Force. The cold mechanical signature of surveillance technology operating without organic intent, which has its own flavor distinct from the living presences that populate the Force's texture. Like fingers of ice dragged across still water. He was in the corridor outside the medical suite when it arrived, and he stood still for 3 seconds confirming what he was feeling before he moved. He finds Obi-Wan in the facility's small operations room, standing over the scanner display with Bail's pilot, an Alderaanian woman named Jesma, who has the focused economy of movement of someone who spent her formative years being told she was in the wrong profession and decided to be extremely good at it regardless. The display shows 2 contacts. Slow, methodical. They've accelerated the grid. Obi-Wan says without looking up. I felt them, Anakin says. Jesma glances at him. She has been glancing at him with this specific quality since they arrived. Not hostility. Not fear, but the alert assessment of a woman recalibrating a prior model. She had a model for Anakin Skywalker, the way most people in the Republic had a model for Anakin Skywalker, and the man standing in this operations room is producing data that does not conform to the model. She has not resolved this yet. 2 of them, she says. Viper-class probe droids. Sensor range on those is approximately 8 kilometers active scan, 15 passive. We're inside 15, Obi-Wan says. We've been inside 15 for 40 minutes, Jesma says. Which means if they've been running passive scans since entry, they already know something's here, Anakin says. The room absorbs this. The station's signatures are on navigation charts, Bail says from the doorway. He entered without announcement, which appears to be a habit. A Caladan research facility registers as background noise. They're not looking for us specifically, they're cataloging occupied installations. And when they catalog us, Obi-Wan says, that catalog goes to Imperial intelligence, who will note that a remote medical facility in an asteroid field is currently running above its standard power output. A pause. Because we have 3 additional ships in the bay. Bail looks at Anakin. Anakin is looking at the display. The 2 contacts moving in their patient grid. Can we take them out? Jesma says. Viper probes have a destruction protocol, Anakin says. You destroy one, it transmits its final sensor log before it goes. We'd be confirming our presence and our location simultaneously. So we can't destroy them, Bail says. We can destroy them if we're already moving, Anakin says. If the ships are in the air when the log transmits, the location data is accurate but the quarry is gone. He looks at the contact positions. We have approximately 4 hours before they complete the grid pattern and reach active scan range of the docking bay. Obi-Wan says, Padmé. I know, Anakin says. The Caladan physician listens to the situation with the same unhurried attention it applies to everything. When Anakin finishes, it is quiet for a moment in the way of a being that is processing rather than pausing. Moving her is not without risk, it says. The cardiovascular event this morning was mild. It resolved. But it was a signal. The body under this level of sustained stress is operating with reduced margin. A precise pause. That said, the alternative risk profile is considerably worse. Yes, Anakin says. 4 hours is sufficient to stabilize her for transport. Assuming the transport vessel has basic life support monitoring, the large pale eyes move to Anakin's face. She will need to remain reclined. No significant physical exertion. If there is any escalation of the cardiovascular pattern during transit, I'll know, Anakin says. The physician looks at him for a moment with an expression that, on a human face, would read as an attempt to categorize something that resists categorization. Yes, it says. I expect you will. Padmé takes the information the way she takes all information, immediately, completely, without the intermediate step of visible reaction. 4 hours, she says. Less now. 3.5. She is already moving, pushing herself upright on the cot with the careful economy of a woman who has been given specific instructions about exertion, and is following them precisely because she has done the risk calculation herself and arrived at the same conclusion as the physician. She does not ask for help. She accepts Anakin's hand when he offers it. Where are we going, she says. Bail is working on it. That's not an answer. It's the answer I have right now. She looks at him. He looks back. This particular exchange, the insufficient answer, the acknowledgement that the insufficiency is temporary rather than evasive, has the quality of something they have navigated before, in other rooms, under other pressures, and have developed a functional approach to. She lets it stand. The corridor alarm sounds at hour 2, not the medical tone. The facility's perimeter system, a flat 2-note sequence that the Caladan use for external breach detection. Anakin is in the docking bay running pre-flight checks on the meridian when it sounds, and he is in motion before the second note completes. Obi-Wan is already in the operations room, not the probes, Jesma says. Her hands are moving across the scanner with the speed of someone who has rehearsed emergency response and is grateful to finally be rehearsing with stakes. The probes are still on the outer grid. This is a ship. Single contact. Small, coming in fast from the ecliptic. How small? Obi-Wan says. Courier class. Military grade. Modified, She looks up. The transponder registration is Coruscant Senate District. Executive tier. She pauses, runs the registration against the codes in Bale's diplomatic files. The display returns a result she reads with the careful neutrality of a professional delivering information she would prefer not to have. This ship launched from the Senate District within hours of Order 66. The registration traces back to the Chancellor's own executive fleet. The operations room is very still. Obi-Wan looks at Anakin. Not a clone unit following a chip-activated command. Not a probe droid running a catalog sweep. A ship dispatched personally from Palpatine, from the Emperor, and that title sits in Anakin's mind with the specific weight of a thing that is real now. That has a shape and a name, and is moving through space toward this station at attack speed. How long? Anakin says. At current approach vector, 50 minutes. He sent someone, Obi-Wan says. Quiet. Working through it. Someone he trusted enough to dispatch alone. Someone capable of handling this. Anakin is already calculating. The probe droids flagged an anomaly. Someone in Palpatine's office cross-referenced it against known fugitive profiles and dispatched. He looks at the contact position, the deliberate arc of approach. This isn't a sweep. This is a hunt. One hunter, Bale says from the doorway. Against 2 Jedi. Obi-Wan says nothing for a moment. Then, we should know what we're facing before we assume the arithmetic is in our favor. Anakin looks at the display, the contact moving in its fast, purposeful arc. 50 minutes. There is no further intelligence to pull. Whatever Palpatine has sent, it has come without a registry that Bale's network can match against known threats. A name. A rank. A file. There is nothing except the speed of approach and the origin of the ship, and the cold fact of someone crossing the asteroid field at attack velocity toward a station where 2 Jedi are standing with a pregnant senator. I'll take the corridor, Anakin says. We'll take the corridor, Obi-Wan says. The correction is immediate, mild, and absolute. Padmé needs someone with her. Bale is with her. Jesma is with her. A pause. The composed authority that is Obi-Wan's register in tactical situations, the voice that has directed engagements from Geonosis to the Outer Rim. We go together, Anakin. That is not a point I'm prepared to discuss. Anakin looks at him. 13 years. Every impossible room. Every engagement where the correct answer was together even when together was harder. Together, he says. They move. The outer corridor of the Polis Massa facility is cut directly into the asteroid's rock face, not constructed so much as excavated, the walls bearing the marks of the boring equipment that made them, functional and raw and cold in the way that only genuine rock is cold. Strip lighting runs along the ceiling at intervals. Between the strips, shadow, they take positions on either side of the main access corridor. 15 meters of sight line to the external docking seal. The seal is closed. It will not stay closed. Anakin feels the ship dock. Feels the connection of the umbilical to the station's hull. He feels what comes off the ship before it opens. Dark side, not the enormous, systemic darkness of Palpatine, not the thing that permeated every interaction Anakin had with his supposed mentor, the background radiation of a man who had lived in the dark side for 80 years. This is different, younger, rawer, the dark side as wound rather than architecture, something that is being fed by pain that has not resolved. That is being weaponized, because the alternative is being consumed by it. He knows this feeling. He knows it the way you know your own handwriting. The docking seal opens. She walks through it with her blade already lit, a single crimson saber, the kyber crystal bled to the color of something decided rather than inherited. Held in the grip of someone for whom the weapon is an extension of mood rather than a tool. She is tall. The dark traveling clothes sit on her frame with a quality that is not quite comfort, more like armor she put on a long time ago and has stopped noticing. Her face, beneath the hood, is angular and specific, and carries the expression of a woman who has been pointed at a target and has found, as she always finds, that the pointing is the closest thing she has to purpose. She sees them both. She stops. Something crosses her face, the rapid recalculation of a woman who was briefed on 1 Jedi fugitive and has arrived to find 2. Skywalker, she says, Her voice is flat, accented with something he can't place. "Yes," Anakin says. "The Emperor will be very pleased," she says. "He won't," Anakin says. "But I understand why you think that." Her blade shifts in her grip. A habit. The hand tightens. "You should surrender," she says. It does not sound like a recommendation. It sounds like the last item on a list she is required to present before proceeding to items that interest her more. "You should leave," Obi-Wan says pleasantly. She moves. She is fast. That is the first operational fact. Not fast in the way of trained Jedi who have spent years refining speed as a discipline. Fast in the way of someone for whom speed is a survival response that became a fighting style. The body having learned early that the difference between fast and not fast is the difference between alive and not. She comes off the starting position with the blade moving in a diagonal sweep that covers her approach vector, while generating enough committed momentum that deflecting it fully costs more than avoiding it. Obi-Wan avoids it. He steps back, and to the left with the specific economy of Soresu, the minimum motion necessary, nothing wasted. The style that treats defensive positioning as its own form of aggression. His blade comes up in a guard that invites her to overcommit. She does not overcommit. She pulls the strike at the last second and redirects into a lateral sweep, aimed at his knee. He moves the knee. Anakin is watching her left hand. The blade is the distraction. The left hand is where the actual decision-making lives. He can see it in the micro-adjustments of her grip, the way her left wrist telegraphs direction changes a half-second before the blade commits to them. He waits. She drives Obi-Wan back 6 meters with a combination that is genuinely impressive. 3 strikes that each require a full defensive response, chained with a speed that gives no recovery interval between them. Obi-Wan handles all 3 and gives ground deliberately, which is not retreat but positioning, and she either knows this or doesn't care. Her forward momentum does not slow. Anakin steps into her blind side. Not to strike. He reaches into the Force and takes the blade. Not from her hands. She has a combat grip, Force-resistant. The trained response of someone who has fought Force users before and learned that a weapon held tightly enough can resist telekinetic extraction. He takes the angle instead. He reaches into her blade arm's extension and applies lateral force pressure, not ripping the saber away but pushing the arc of her committed strike 15 centimeters off its intended line. Throwing her shoulder out of position mid-swing, which is the equivalent of redirecting a thrown stone mid-flight, and the sudden misdirection throws her weight off by just enough. Just enough is enough. Obi-Wan's blade comes in flat and fast and stops at her throat. She freezes. The corridor is very still. Her breathing is elevated. His is not. That disparity registers in her face, the specific frustration of a combatant who has expended significant energy and finds the opponent has expended almost none. "There it is," Obi-Wan says quietly. She does not stay still for long. Anakin expected this. She is not trained for surrender. She is trained for scenarios where surrender is not offered, where the engagement ends one of 2 ways, and both ways end with someone dead. The concept of a stopped fight is not a category her conditioning includes. She drops. Straight down, knees, hands, the full collapse of a combatant going to the floor, not in defeat, but in the reconfiguration of options. Obi-Wan's blade passes over her head. She rolls left. Her hand finds her hilt and she comes up fast, shorter range now, faster movement, and drives the blade upward at Obi-Wan's chin. Anakin takes her wrist. His hand closes around it with the strength of a man who spent his formative years doing manual labor on a desert planet before discovering the Force and has never entirely lost the physical foundation of that. The strike stops. She twists against the grip, technically correct, the leverage point well chosen, and finds that it does not move. They are very close. He can see her face clearly. There is something in it that he was not expecting. Not fear. She does not appear to have a straightforward relationship with fear in the way of most beings. Not rage, though rage is present. Something underneath the rage. The thing he felt through the Force when she walked off the ship. The wound. The dark side as pain rather than power is visible in her face when she is this close and fighting this hard, and the performance has momentarily been stripped by the physical reality of a wrist she cannot move. "You're not going to win this," Anakin says. He says it quietly, not as a taunt, as information. Her jaw tightens. "You're not going to win," he says again, "and you know it. You knew it the second you saw there were two of us. You came anyway." A pause. "Why?" Something flickers in her eyes. "Release my wrist," she says. "Tell me why you came anyway." "Orders," she says. Flat, immediate, the word of someone reaching for the simplest available answer. "He sent you alone," Anakin says. "One person, at attack speed, to a remote asteroid station to engage 2 Jedi. That's not a standard order. That's something he knew you'd volunteer for." A pause. "Why would you volunteer for this?" The something flickers again. She pulls against his grip. It does not move. "He said Skywalker," she says. "He said you were alive and running and She stops. "You wanted to be the one," Anakin says. Her silence confirms it more completely than any answer. He releases her wrist. Obi-Wan says nothing. He maintains his position and his blade, and says absolutely nothing, which is Obi-Wan understanding that something specific is happening, and making the decision to let it happen, rather than managing it toward a predetermined outcome. This is one of the things Anakin has always valued in him, and has never found the words for. She does not attack. The release catches her off balance in a way the grip didn't. She was organized around the constraint, and the removal of the constraint leaves her without a structure to push against. "Who were you?" Anakin says. Before, her face goes through something complicated. She looks at him with the expression of someone who has been asked a question in a language they stopped speaking long enough ago that the vocabulary is gone, but the sound of it is familiar. "That's not your concern," she says. "It's not," he agrees. "But I'm asking." A long moment. The strip lighting hums its low hum between them. "I was a Jedi," she says. The past tense lands in the corridor with a specific weight. Not the weight of loss, the weight of something that has been processed into something else, transformed under enough pressure and heat to be unrecognizable in its current form. Not for long. Long enough. Anakin looks at her face. "They came for me during Order 66, she says, "the clones. I ran." A pause in which she decides something. "I ran, and they caught the others instead. The ones who were with me." The jaw sets. "I kept running." The thing in her face has a name now. He has seen it before, not in a mirror, which would be the obvious comparison, but in worse places. In the faces of soldiers after Jabim. In the face of Ahsoka after the siege of Mandalore. The specific architecture of a person who is alive because someone else died in the space where they were standing, and has been trying to make their survival worth the mathematics ever since. "He found you," Anakin says. "Not the Inquisitors. Not an institution. The specific person who would have known exactly where to look for a surviving Jedi who already believed she owed a debt she could never repay." Palpatine. Her eyes come up to his. "He offered a purpose," she says. "After. Not a purpose." Anakin says. "A direction. Those aren't the same thing. You came here alone," he says at attack speed, "to take on 2 Jedi. Because he said my name. Because if you brought me in, that would settle the mathematics. That would be enough of a thing to justify." He stops. Chooses. "It doesn't work that way." "I know, because I tried. Different equation. Same architecture." She looks at him for a long time. "You were going to join him," she says. "That's what he told me. That you'd turned, and then lost your nerve." "Yes. What stopped you?" "Someone reminded me of something I'd forgotten." He pauses. "About myself." The corridor is very quiet. Obi-Wan has not moved. The strip lighting continues its hum. "I can't let you take me in," Anakin says. "You understand that." "I understand it," she says. Her voice has changed. The flatness is still there, but the thing underneath the flatness is closer to the surface now. Less managed. "I'm going to give you a choice instead," he says. Because someone gave me one recently and I've decided that's a thing worth passing on. She watches him. Your ship is in the docking bay. You can walk back to it. You can tell him whatever you need to tell him. We were gone when you arrived. The station was empty. The probe droid data was corrupted. Whatever keeps you alive. A pause. Or you can stay. The word lands. She stares at him. Stay, she repeats. The thing you ran from during Order 66 is still true, he says. Whatever made you a Jedi before the clones came, that's still true. He didn't build you. He found you and pointed you. Being unpointed is not the same as having nowhere to go. A long silence. You're asking me to defect, she says. I'm telling you the door is open, he says. What you walk through it is your decision. Her hand moves to the hilt of the saber at her side. He watches it move without reacting. She could light it. She could make the last 14 minutes a feint, the whole conversation, a tactic. He does not believe it is a tactic. He believed it was real the moment she stopped pulling against his grip. The hand rests on the hilt without closing. She looks at the floor of the corridor, the raw rock, the excavation marks, the asteroids in different geology. I don't know what I'd. She stops. Starts again. I have nowhere. You have a ship, he says. Same as us. He steps back. He turns and walks back into the facility, past Obi-Wan, past the strip lighting and the cold walls of excavated rock, without looking back. He is counting. At 8 steps he hears her follow. He does not stop counting. He lets the number reach 14, 15, 16. And then he lets the counting go because she is here, and the corridor is behind them, and ahead is the hangar bay where Padmé is waiting, and the meridian is prepped, and there is still exactly enough time, if they move now, to be gone before it matters what any of them chose. He moves faster. They are 40 minutes into the jump to hyperspace when Padmé's water breaks. Anakin is in the cockpit running the navigation check when he feels it, not through any transmission, not through a sound that carries through the ship's interior, but through the Force, through the specific frequency of her distress that he has been tracking the way a navigator tracks a beacon, continuous and peripheral since the moment they left Polis Massa's docking bay. The quality of her presence in the Force changes, not darkening, sharpening, the specific sharpening of a body that has made a decision it is not asking permission for. He is out of the pilot's seat before he has consciously decided to move. The main cabin of the Meridian is not a delivery room. This is the first operational fact, and it does not change any of the other facts, so he files it and moves past it. What the main cabin has, the fold-out medical cot they brought from the Polis Massa suite, the Kala Dahin physician insisted, loading it herself with the unhurried efficiency that characterizes everything she does. A basic life support monitor. The medical kit that Obi-Wan packed with the thoroughness of a man who has been in enough impossible situations to know that thoroughness is the only variable you can control in advance. Padmé is on the cot. She is not panicking. He notes this with something that is not quite relief and not quite pride, but lives in the territory adjacent to both. The recognition of a person doing an extraordinary thing in an ordinary way, because they have decided that extraordinary is not a register they have time for right now. Her face is tight with the specific tightness of pain that is being managed rather than endured, the controlled breathing of a woman who has done her research on this too. Because Padmé researches everything. Because information is the instrument she trusts most in any situation she cannot control through politics. I know, she says when she sees his face. You know, he says. I've known for about 20 minutes. I was waiting for a gap between, a breath, controlled, measured, between contractions. You were waiting for a gap, to tell you at a non-alarming moment. A pause for breath. This is the gap. He sits beside her and takes her hand, and does not say anything about the 20 minutes. Obi-Wan takes the position of someone who has read everything available on obstetric emergency, and is now reconciling the reading with the reality. He moves with careful competence, not the fluid expertise of someone who has done this before, but the organized competence of someone who is treating the absence of expertise as a problem to be solved through attention rather than a reason to defer. He checks the monitor. He opens the medical kit with the specific systematic approach of a man who has learned that the way you open a kit under pressure is the same way you open it when there's no pressure. Because the hands need to have done it before. The woman from Palpatine's fleet, she has not given them a name, and they have not pushed for one, and she occupies the corner of the cabin with the specific quality of someone who is uncertain which version of herself to be in this room, stands without moving, and watches Obi-Wan work. After a moment she crosses to the other side of the cot. "I've done this," she says quietly. To no one specifically. To the room. Obi-Wan looks up. "Field delivery," she says. Her voice has the flatness that covers things, but the thing it's covering this time is different from the corridor. This is not rage or pain. This is something older, the specific flatness of a competence one wishes one did not have. Acquired under circumstances one would prefer not to name. Twice, in the field. After Order 66. A pause. Refugees, Obi-Wan hands her the kit without comment. She takes it. Padm's hand in Anakin's is doing something specific. Not gripping for comfort, gripping for anchor. The grip of a woman who needs a fixed point to measure herself against, while the rest of her body becomes something she is navigating, rather than occupying. He holds it at the tension she sets, adjusting as it changes, not offering more contact than she is asking for. Between contractions, she talks. This is also something he did not expect and recognizes as specifically her. The way she uses language as organization, as the tool that makes experience manageable by giving it structure. She is not talking through the pain. She is talking in the gaps between it, maintaining continuity of self through the instrument she trusts most. "When this is over," she says. When they're here and safe. A breath. "I want to go somewhere with trees." "All right," he says. "I've lived on Coruscant for 15 years. I've lived in cities my entire adult life." Another breath longer. "I want to stand somewhere and not be able to see the edge of it." "Where it just continues. I'll find it," he says. "A world with a name we choose," she says. "Not a designation." A name. Yes. A contraction. He holds the grip at the tension she sets. She breathes through it with the controlled economy of someone spending oxygen precisely, not a single breath wasted on reaction. When it passes, her eyes come back to his. "We're going to be all right," she says. She says it the way she said "there is good in you" in the apartment, not as reassurance, not as the generous performance of hope, but as a verified fact delivered in the tone of someone who has done the analysis and is reporting the result. He looks at her face. "Yes," he says. The Force does something at hour 2. He feels it between one contraction and the next, a shift in the quality of the Force's presence in the room, a gathering of something that is not dark and not entirely light but enormous, ancient, the specific quality of the Force when it is paying very close attention to something that matters to it. He has felt this once before. Palpatine's office. The gap of silence before the vision. He goes very still. It is not a vision. Not the total immersive transmission of Polis Massa's White Room. It is smaller, more like a pressure, a concentrated weight against the membrane of the present moment. The Force pressing on now from the direction of what was going to be. What was going to be, in the timeline that the vision came from, in the 3 weeks of future that no longer exists. What he feels is absence. The shape of a room on Polis Massa that this room is replacing. The outline of a death that this birth is overwriting. He cannot see it, there is nothing to see. Because that future is not arriving. Because Padmé is here and breathing and her hand is in his and she is going somewhere with trees when this is over. But he can feel the outline the way you feel the shape of a word you cannot remember. The container of it. The space it occupied. He sits with it. He does not fight it. He does not flinch from the shape of the thing that was going to happen, the specific weight of the alternative. The white room and the alone and the I know, there's still, cutting off before it could finish. He lets it be present. He lets himself feel the full cost of what was almost lost, the specific inventory of everything in this room that would not exist without the 3 seconds in the Chancellor's office when the Force tore a seam, and Padmé spent her last breath defending him. Then, he lets it go. Not dramatically. Not with the effort of a man conquering something. He lets it go the way you set down something heavy when you have arrived where you were going. Not because you have stopped valuing it, but because you are here now, and here is where your hands are needed. Padm's grip tightens. He comes back to the room. The boy arrives first. He announces himself with a sound that is not proportional to his size, a large, declarative sound for something so new. The specific indignation of a being who has been somewhere and has opinions about the transition. Obi-Wan receives him with the care of a man handling something irreplaceable, which is the accurate category. The woman from the corridor cuts the cord with the clean efficiency of someone who has done it before and finds no ceremony in it, only precision. Obi-Wan holds him up. Anakin looks at his son's face. The face is red and furious and very small and entirely itself, not resembling anyone yet, in the way of new faces, existing in the moment before the feature sorting begins. There is nothing in it that looks like darkness. There is nothing in it that looks like anything other than arrival. Luke, the name is already there, has been there, chosen months ago in a quiet moment he cannot fully remember except that Padmé said it once, and it landed in him with the weight of a thing that is already true. Luke, he says. Obi-Wan looks at him. Something in the old teacher's face. Not the composure. Not the performance of calm. The thing underneath. The recognition of a man who has been in this moment only once before, and lost it, and is being given, against all probability, a second one. He hands Luke to Anakin. The girl arrives 7 minutes later, quieter than her brother, not distressed, simply more deliberate, entering the room with a quality that is already, somehow, political. She looks at the room. That is the impression, that she is conducting an assessment. Leia, also already named, also already true. The woman from the corridor holds her, while Anakin holds Luke and Padmé looks at both of them with the expression of someone who has arrived at the far side of an impossible thing and is taking a full accounting of what is on this side. The accounting takes a moment. Then she holds out her arms. Anakin stands at the small porthole of the Meridian's main cabin, while Padmé holds both of them, one in the crook of each arm, the specific balanced weight of it, the slight adjustment of her grip as she calibrates. She is talking to them. Low, private, he cannot hear the words and does not try to. He looks out the porthole. Hyperspace does its blue-white work outside. All that distance, compressed to light. He puts his hand flat against the transparent steel. The force is very quiet, not empty, the opposite of empty, the specific fullness of a room where everything that should be present is present, where the accounting has been done and the result is sufficient. He has been in the Force his entire life, and he has felt it as burden, as gift, as weapon, as wound, as the thing that made him exceptional, and the thing that made him a target, and the thing that showed him the future and asked him to choose. This is what it feels like when it is simply true. He does not close his eyes. He watches hyperspace move, all that compressed distance, all that light, and behind him Padmé's voice continues its low private accounting of the two new things in the room. And the woman from the corridor stands in the far corner of the cabin, with her back against the wall and her arms folded and her eyes on the middle distance, and Obi-Wan sits at the foot of the cot with the posture of a man who is not going to move for a very long time, and has made his peace with that, and the Meridian carries them forward through the dark between stars. And the vision that was going to be does not arrive. It does not arrive. It does not arrive. It has lost. The woman from the corridor approaches him at some point in the third hour. He does not turn from the porthole. He feels her beside him. The force around her is different from the corridor now. Less armored, the wound still present, but no longer being actively weaponized. She stands at the porthole with him, and they look at hyperspace together for a moment without speaking. "I don't have a name to give you," she says finally. "Not one I want back yet." "You don't have to give one," Anakin says. A long pause. The blue-white light outside does its indifferent work. "I was a Padawan," she says. "First year. I'd barely," she stops. "It doesn't matter how long I'd been." "It matters," he says. "But you don't have to say it now." She looks at Padmé holding the twins. Something in her face moves through something that is not a single emotion, but several occupying the same space at once, none of them with names yet. "They're loud," she says. "The boy especially," he says. Another silence. Not uncomfortable. The silence of two people who have run out of the words they were pretending to need, and have arrived at the ones they actually do. "Where are we going?" she says. "Somewhere with trees," he says. After that, "I don't know yet." She nods once. It is not the nod of someone satisfied with the answer. It is the nod of someone who has learned, in the last several hours, that answers of this kind are the only honest ones available, and has decided that honest is preferable to the alternative. "I'll keep flying my ship," she says, "until I know what else to do with it." "That's enough," he says. "For now, that's enough." Outside, hyperspace continues its ancient and different work. Somewhere in the cabin behind them, Luke makes a sound at nothing in particular. The exploratory sound of a being who has discovered that sound is a tool and has immediately begun investigating its applications, and Leia, apparently, has opinions about this. Obi-Wan says something too low to hear. Padmé laughs. It is a small sound, tired and real and full of something that is not quite any single thing. Not relief, not happiness in the ordinary sense. Not the uncomplicated joy of a woman holding two healthy children in a quiet room. It is the laughter of someone who has been through the full cost of something and come out the other side still in possession of themselves, which is a different and more durable thing than happiness. Anakin turns from the porthole. He goes back to his family. The world has no name yet. That is the first thing. Not a deficiency, but a deliberate condition. Bail found it through 3 intermediaries, each one knowing only their own piece of the chain, the location passing hand to hand in fragments that only assemble into coordinates when you have all of them. The planet does not appear on Imperial navigation charts. It does not appear on Republic charts either, which means it does not appear on anything, which means it is, functionally, a place that does not exist until you are standing on it. They are standing on it. The house is modest in the specific way of things, built for permanence rather than comfort. Stone foundation, local timber, a roof that slopes correctly for the rainfall pattern Bail's geological survey indicated. Anakin built most of it. This is not a metaphor. He built it with his hands, over 6 weeks, with the methodical satisfaction of a man who grew up understanding that things need to be made before they can be used, and who has spent 22 years in a life where making things happened at the speed of the Force rather than the speed of wood and stone and the honest resistance of material that does not cooperate simply because you want it to. The building was good for him. He will not say this to anyone. He knows it is true. The world has trees. This was not incidental to Bail's selection criteria. Padmé communicated the requirement through the same compressed shorthand she uses for everything essential, and Bail, who has known her for 15 years and understands her priorities with the accuracy of long collaboration, found a world with trees. They are not trees like any Anakin has seen before, broader at the base, with a canopy structure that filters the light into something particulate and green, but they continue past the point where you can see the edge of them, and that is the specification that was given. And it has been met. She stood in them for a long time the first morning. He watched her from the house and did not go out. Some things need to be done alone, and her relationship with this world, with the fact of it, the specific improbability of being alive and standing in trees on a planet with no name, required private accounting. He understood this. He waited. When she came back, her face was different. Not resolved. Something more complicated than resolved. The face of a woman who has made her peace with a cost without pretending the cost was not real, who has done the full accounting and accepted the total without revising any of the figures. She said, "The trees are extraordinary." He said, "Yes." That was the end of that conversation, and the beginning of everything else. There are things they have lost that do not get smaller with time. The Senate. Not the institution. The institution is gone, dissolved into imperial bureaucracy with the theatrical efficiency of a man who spent 60 years planning exactly how to dissolve it. She grieves the idea of it. The republic she believed in was not a naive belief. She understood its failures, documented them, fought them from the inside for 15 years. But she believed the structure was redeemable. That belief is gone, and the space it occupied does not fill easily. She does not talk about this often. When she does, he listens without trying to resolve it, because it is not a thing that resolves. It is a thing that is carried. Leia is with Bail. This is the cost that lives in the house with them, the way that grief lives in houses. Not always in the same room, not always audible, but present in the building's specific weight, when everything else is quiet. They made the decision together, with the full clarity of two people who understand that clarity is not the same as ease. One child disappears into the uncharted dark survivable for the Empire's intelligence apparatus, as a loose end. Two children disappearing together is a pattern, and patterns get found. Leia will be a senator's daughter. She will have Alderaan, and Bail, and Breha, and a childhood that is not exile. She will be safe in the way that visible, accounted for people are safe, the protection of public existence, of records and schools and a name on a manifest. He knows Leia is safe. He knows it the way he knows things through the Force, not as information, but as something closer to weather, a sense of the shape of things beyond the visible horizon. She is whole. She is loud apparently from Bail's transmissions, opinionated already at 3 months, with a quality of focused attention that Padmé says is familiar, and Anakin says he cannot imagine where it comes from. And Padmé looks at him with the expression that this joke deserves. They have Luke. Luke at 4 months is a specific kind of problem. He is not loud in the way Bail describes Leia. He is loud in a different register, not the political volume of a being who has opinions about the room, but the persistent, exploratory volume of a being who has discovered that sound is a tool and is conducting a thorough investigation of its applications. He makes sounds at the trees. He makes sounds at the light when it comes through the window in the morning. He made a sound at Obi-Wan's beard the first time Obi-Wan visited, that lasted approximately 4 minutes, and reduced Obi-Wan to a state Anakin has never seen him in before, and will describe, privately, as delighted helplessness. The Force moves around him. Anakin feels it the way he felt it at the birth, not as power, not as the enormous directed presence that Palpatine's Sith teachings framed Force sensitivity as, but as something more like weather again. Natural, continuous, the Force paying attention to Luke with the quality of attention it pays to things that matter to it. He will be something extraordinary. Anakin knows this without wanting it for him. The distinction matters. He does not want Luke to be extraordinary in the way he was extraordinary, the way that exceptionalism became a lever other people used. He wants Luke to be extraordinary in the way trees are extraordinary. Continuous, extending past the point where you can see the edge. He has not figured out how to give him that. He is trying to figure out how to give him that. It is, he suspects, the work of all the years ahead. The woman from the corridor has a name now. She gave it to them on the 3rd day on the unnamed world, in the way of someone returning a thing they had put down for safekeeping, and are not entirely sure they trust themselves to carry again. She offered it the way Anakin has learned she offers everything, straight, without preamble, without the social cushioning that most people apply to vulnerable disclosures. He uses it when he speaks to her. So does Padmé. Obi-Wan, who communicates in frequencies that are less about names and more about acknowledgement, calls her nothing and means everything by it, which she has apparently decided is acceptable. She is not healed. He would not use that word, and neither would she. It implies a restoration to a prior state, and the prior state is gone, which is not the same as the prior person being gone. She is present. She is learning the difference between those two things, which is the only work there is. And she is doing it with the specific stubbornness of someone who ran once, and has decided that running is a thing she is done with. She is teaching Luke to recognize shapes. This was not planned. Luke looked at her one morning with the comprehensive, unguarded attention of a 4-month-old who has not yet learned to manage his regard, and something in her went very still. And then she sat down on the floor of the house and held up her hand and said, "This is a hand. It has 5 fingers." And Luke made the sound of a being receiving new information and considering its implications. Anakin watched this from across the room and did not say anything. Some things do not require words to be accurate. Obi-Wan's message arrived 6 days ago. Brief, the old frequency, the old cipher. Bael's people are ready to move. Yoda is on Dagobah. Don't ask why, I'm not sure I understand the answer. I'm going somewhere quiet myself. A pause. Then, Anakin. I don't know what to do with what you did on that asteroid. I've been trying to find the right category for it and I can't. I keep coming back to what you said in the hangar, paying. I think I understand what you meant. I wanted you to know that I'm paying too. In my own way, in my own place. Another pause. The frequency hum. Then, take care of her. Take care of him. And take care of yourself. Which is something I failed to make clear to you often enough. Anakin has not replied. He has been composing the reply for 6 days. Not because he does not know what to say, he knows what to say. It is not long. It does not require the 13 years of accumulated language that he and Obi-Wan carry between them. He is composing it because he wants to say it correctly. Because Obi-Wan said something that deserved a correct answer, and Anakin has spent his entire life giving Obi-Wan fast answers, when the correct answer was the right one. He will send it today. He knows already what it will say. Not the full shape of it, that is still assembling itself, the way certain truths assemble, from the outside in, but the center of it. The thing around which the rest will arrange itself. It will say, I heard you. That is the beginning. It will say, come back when you can. There are trees here. That is the middle. The end is still finding its words. He thinks it will be something about the morning. He thinks Obi-Wan will understand why. The morning comes the way mornings come on this world, not with drama, not with the binary sunset architecture of Tatooine, or the perpetual amber glow of Coruscant, but with the modest arrival of a yellow sun clearing a mountain ridge and sending light across the hills in a wave. The grass bends toward it. Some things are the same on every world with a yellow sun, and the grass bending toward it is one of them. Anakin is outside when it arrives. He is holding Luke against his chest, the specific position they have arrived at through weeks of iteration, Luke's head tucked below his chin, one large hand spanning the entirety of the small back, the weight of him distributed the way Luke prefers, which is a preference Luke communicated through the Force and through the persistent sounds of a being who knew what he wanted and intended to be clear about it. Luke is not making sounds now. He is looking at the light. Padmé is behind him. He does not need to turn to know. She is a specific presence in the Force, specific and continuous, and as familiar to him now as his own breathing. The presence that was there in the Chancellor's office and in the underworld and in the freighter and in the delivery room and has been there every morning on this world, without a name, standing slightly behind him, close enough that her shoulder is against his arm. She has been watching Luke watch the light. She says, he's going to be trouble. Anakin says, he's going to be extraordinary. Same thing she says. In our family. He closes his eyes. The sun is warm on his face. Behind him the house holds everything that exists inside it. The woman from the corridor cross-legged on the floor with Luke's shaped toys arranged in a semicircle she has been refining for 3 days. The comm unit in the far room with a message to Obi-Wan half composed and waiting. 2 cups of caf going cold on the table because they came outside before they finished them, and neither of them thought to bring the cups. The ordinary residue of a morning. The evidence of a life that is being lived rather than survived. He has spent a long time learning the difference between those two things. He thinks he is beginning to understand it. There is a sound from inside, Padmé's chair on the stone floor, the specific sound of it, the woman from the corridor saying something low that he cannot hear from here, a response that might be laughter, the soft percussion of the ordinary morning continuing in its ordinary way, without requiring anything from him, except his presence in it. He is present in it. He opens his eyes. The sun is on Luke's face now, the morning light arriving across the ridge in its slow daily wave and reaching them here, at the edge of the grass, at the beginning of the trees that extend past the point where you can see the edge of them. Luke reaches toward it with one small hand, not grasping, not the grip of need, just the open reach of a being who has seen something and wants to be closer to it. The gesture of someone who does not yet know that some lights are too far to touch and has not yet been given any reason to stop trying. Anakin watches him reach. He thinks about his mother's hands in his. He thinks about Obi-Wan's voice on a frequency only they knew. He thinks about Padmé's palm flat against his chest in a lamplit apartment while Coruscant burned outside, and she stated him as a fact. He thinks, there is good in him. It is no longer a voice from a future that did not happen. It is not a vision or a warning or a last desperate transmission across the dark. It is a morning he is standing in, with the sun on his face, and his son in his arms, and the trees continuing behind him past the point where you can see the edge of them. He covers Luke's reaching hand with his own. He does not stop him from reaching. He reaches with him. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.